Hello and welcome back to Spartan Student version 9. Today we're going to be going through tutorial number 2, which is called Sketching Organic Molecules. And to get to that tutorial, you'll head to the Activities menu, click Tutorials, and then click this second link to open the PDF. I already have it open in another window here, so we are going to go ahead and get started, first by clicking New Sketch. Okay, so we've just entered the 2D builder or the 2D sketch palette, and you'll see that there are a number of atoms here. We've got hydrogen, boron, carbon, silicon, nitrogen, phosphorus, oxygen, sulfur, and then we've got our halogens, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Now, if you wanted to get any atom that isn't available from this list, you'd click More, and you can bring up the full periodic table. We also have our groups and ligands available here as well. You'll also see we've got benzene here, as well as cyclohexane, and you can double click on this and look at some different cyclohexane attachment points, and you can also double click on this cyclopentane and get a cycloheptane or cyclobutane or cyclopropane. And here we've got some other different groups. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do today is just go over some of the operating features for the sketch builder. So what I'm going to do is select carbon. I'm going to click and drag, and that'll give us ethane. There's a carbon here and a carbon here, single bonded. If you drag it again, we'll have propane. And if you click this undo button, it'll undo that last sketch you added, and you can drag back across this bond and make it a double bond, or you can double click again to make it a triple bond. So you can also translate this in the X and Y axes by holding down the right mouse button and dragging your cursor. So I'm moving it right, up, down, left, and if you hold the shift key and the left mouse button and drag that up or down, you can rotate your sketch. And I'm going to hit this trash can and clear the current structure. The first thing that we're going to draw is N,N-dimethylaniline. So the way that we're going to do that is first by clicking on benzene from the palette and then double clicking on screen. I'm going to move this over to the right by holding down the right mouse button and dragging just to translate it into a more central location on the screen. I'm going to click nitrogen and click this carbon, drag up, and then select carbon, and then over the nitrogen you'll click and drag away left, then right. I'm going to use this broom icon to clean up the structure, and then if we were to click on this sunglass icon and enter view mode, we can convert this to 3D, and you'll see we've sketched N,N-dimethylaniline. So I'm going to close out of that, head back into the sketch builder, and we're going to move on to trans-stilbene. So there are a couple ways that you could build this, but I think the quickest way would be to draw one straight line, double click it, select benzene, and then drag up and to the right from this side and down and to the left from this side. And then I'm going to clean it up and bring it into 3D, and you'll see we've got trans-stilbene. Now another way that you could have drawn that would have been to select the benzene. I'm going to rotate this by holding shift and the left mouse button and dragging just to flatten out the top and bottom of the benzene. And then what you could do is select carbon and go up and away, and then over to the right, double click, select benzene again, and drag up and away, and clean it up, bring it into 3D, and that would be another way to draw the same molecule. We're going to move on to our third molecule today, which is indigo. The way that I'm going to do this is by selecting pentane, the cyclopentane, double click. I'm going to rotate this a bit just to match the picture a little bit better and translate it over here. And then I'm going to drag away from here. What I'm going to do next is select cyclohexane. I'm going to double click on this side and that side along this bond on the cyclopentane, and then again corresponding over here. I'm going to clean it up and hold shift and the left mouse button just to keep it flat. And the next thing I'm going to do is select oxygen and add those double bonded oxygens. One is coming off of the 3' labeled carbon and the other on the carbon labeled number 3 in the image on your PDF. Next, I'm going to click on nitrogen, and I'm going to double click on the carbon labeled 1 to replace it, and on 1' to replace that one. And lastly, I'm going to go in and add these double bonds. So I'm going to click carbon, and I'm going to add double bonds for the benzenes here and here. And finally a double bond between these cyclopentane groups here. Clean that up, bring it into 3D, and you'll see that we have sketched indigo. Okay, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is 3-cyano-4-methylcyclohexenyl radical, and this will be drawn by selecting cyclohexane and then again holding shift and the left mouse button. I'm just rotating it to flatten out the top and bottom and match the picture. Next, I'm going to click carbon. I'm going to add a methyl group coming from this carbon labeled 4, a double bond between carbons 1 and 2 here. I'm going to add a third methyl group here. And then I'm going to click nitrogen, and I'm going to build this cyano group here. I'm going to double click once and twice, and now we've got this cyano group. And last but not least, I'm going to click this define radical and double click on carbon 3 to define it as a radical. Clean it up, and that's your 3-cyano-4-methyl-cyclohexenyl radical. Okay, so I am going to get rid of this structure, and the last structure that we're going to be taking a look at today is androsterone. So to draw androsterone, I'm going to select cyclohexane, double click, and then I'm going to double click along this bond to add an adjoining ring. Do the same thing again along this bond, the one between the carbon labeled 8 and 9. And then finally I'm going to click cyclopentane, and I'm going to do the same idea between these 13 and 14 carbons. And now we've got our scaffolding. Next we're going to click carbon, and we're going to add the methyl groups on the carbon 10 and 13 just by dragging up. Next we're going to select oxygen, and we're going to add the hydroxyl group coming off of carbon 3, as well as this double bonded oxygen coming off of carbon 17. And next we're going to add hydrogens on the carbons labeled 5, 8, 9, and 14. So there's 5, 8, 9, and 14. I'm going to clean up the structure, and the last thing that we're going to do is designate chirality using these two icons. So this first one is the upward wedge, and this dashed one is the downward wedge. So I'm going to select the upward wedge first, and then I'm going to click carbon, reselect that, and we're going to make this going upward, this methyl carbon, and this one. I'm going to select hydrogen, and then click again on the upward wedge for the hydrogen coming off of carbon 8, and all the other hydrogens will be downward. Lastly, a downward wedge for the oxygen. Clean that up, bring it into 3D, and you'll see that we have built androsterone. So that's going to conclude our tutorial for today. The next tutorial is going to be on building molecules in 3D, and we'll see you then.